Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh. 2021. Okay, let me just say this first. It's so confusing to try to figure out your top 10 in 2021 because of the way that the Oscars broke everything up. So when you go back chronologically on Wikipedia or whatever, Nomadland, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Judas and the Black Messiah, exactly. Yeah.
It's because they were released in the time frame for them to be 2020 Oscar nominees and winners, but not in 2021. So it was very confusing. So I will say up front, if I repeat myself, I don't care because these are great films. So if I said it in 2020, I'm saying it again in 2021. I don't think so.
Have you incorporated some of those movies into your top?
No, I haven't. But I'm afraid of two things. I'm afraid I did and don't realize it.
Okay.
But I don't think that I did. And I'm also afraid I missed something and you're going to say something and be like, oh no.
What about that one? That almost happened to me with one movie this year. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yep.
There were a few that haunted me that were like, put it down, write it down, write it down. And then I went to the list and was like, oh yeah, definitely. Write it down.
Yep.
So this is how we're going to do this because it is a little bit more complicated than most people do it. Not that complicated. But if my number 10 is your number 3, then we don't talk about it until we get to your number 3.
I've got a spreadsheet here. Of course I do. I have spreadsheets for everything. So I'm ready to type in your 10 through 1 and I'll keep track of it and I will try not to get lost. But yes, so I'm ready to go.
Well, the funny part about that is, and the irony is that you came up with this rule originally.
I'm not the first person to come up with this rule. It just makes sense that...
Oh, yeah. No, you're not the originator. You just said that we should do it this way. And ever since then, you've been like, wait, what are we doing? What number are we on?
I don't know how to explain it. I'm bad at explaining it. So I did have some honorable mentions too. I feel like I can't, since we're putting the 2021 movies to rest for I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point, other movies, but there's movies that I just could not say things about. One of them is Mitchell's versus the Machines, which was nominated for an Academy Award for animated feature. And that's such a great movie. And as far as like movie fans, if you are a movie fan, even if you don't have kids or if you don't have anything like, if you don't like kids movies, like I think there's enough there to grab you because the main character, she aspires to be a filmmaker. And so that is woven into the movie in really, really cool ways. And so it's great. It's a great film. Another one that I wanted to talk about was I finally saw The Souvenir Part 2, Joanna Hogg's movie. And oh my gosh, talk about filmmakers and female filmmakers. Like this whole Souvenir Part 2 is so much, it digs so much more into filmmaking than it does like a relationship. But the relationship from Souvenir Part 1, this movie builds on that relationship and what happened in that first movie and does it in an artistic way. And it's so cool. It's a great movie. And then one documentary, The Rescue, which was also nominated for an Academy Award. The same guy who did Free Solo, and it's a co-directing team. They did Free Solo and The Rescue, and it's very well shot and it's harrowing. It's about kids in Thailand, soccer team, and they were caught in this cave when there was a flood, and they were there for weeks. So it's harrowing, but it's just kind of shows how amazing humans are, like the ability to survive and also the ingenuity that we can come up with things. Do you have any honorable mentions before we get started?
Well, I did want to talk about Matrix Resurrections again. I know that you didn't like that film as much as I did, and I know that it didn't hit for most people. I just thought the concept alone was worth talking about again and making it an honorable mention. I enjoyed it. I've seen it 3 times already. I want to watch it again and again and again. I like what Jonathan Groff did. I like what Neil Patrick Harris did. I like the whole idea that Trinity is the one and that their love is the reason why, and they have to be connected. They have to be close. I like all that concept, and I love the whole meta thing. How do you do it? There's no longer landlines. Not really. So how do you do it? How do you explain that? Do you get a pill? Do you not get a pill? The new Morpheus is cool. So I just had to mention it. And also, I'm a little afraid of the time frame of this film. In the Heights, was this year or last year?
This year, because we watched it in the theater in June before no theaters.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that now. Okay, so honorable mention. It probably would have made my list if it wasn't for the top 10 already that was forming. It's so well done. It's instantaneously a classic. It will be watchable forever. And that sideways dance up the side of the building and then on the roof is amazing. And then I watched how they filmed that, and that was intense. And it's literally defying gravity, both with the actors and the cameras and what they had to do to get the camera shots and hang the cameras and all that other stuff. You know, drop millions of dollars of equipment off the side of a building just to get a side shot. And he didn't want to do it coming out of a window. So they actually were like rock climbing. And I was like, oh. And you can tell because there's that tension in that shot, but it's a good tension. And the song's wonderful. So I wanted to mention that. And then also, it's in my honorable mention list, but it's probably in most people's top 10 list, Coda.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I feel weird about that not being in my top 10 list, but it was number 11 just because of everything else that came before it. It's a wonderful movie, but we'll talk about it later.
All right. So my number 10 is Worst Person in the World.
Okay, we got to talk about it later.
Yeah. What's your number 10?
Passing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did see that. Yeah. Rebecca Hall wrote and directed, right?
Yeah, correct.
Based on a novel?
Yes. Nella Larsen's novel of the same name. Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson putting in BAFTA nominated performances. I'm sure they were like 5.5 on the list of Oscar nominations because their performances are stunning. The stylistic language is amazing. The period piece, I was thinking about it after I realized it was making the list, and I was thinking it's got so many modern overtones, and we really haven't gotten past a lot of the issues that they talk about it. But really, that movie is not about for me, it wasn't necessarily about the finger quotes superficial qualities of somebody's pigment of their skin. It was about accepting yourself for who you know you are. Whether or not that is accepting yourself as a lighter skinned person or a darker skinned person or male or female or transgender, whatever it may be, whether or not society accepts that or not, and also the ability to decide who you think you are or who you know you are. Because who's to say if you're lighter skinned that you can't pass if you want to? Like, yes, I understand the psychological ramifications of that and the political ramifications of that. And I will never understand that fully. I can only watch it in art. But I do understand accepting myself for who I am. And so that's what I pulled out of it. And it has a universal theme. It's not necessarily about two females. It's about accepting who you are. And it touched me. And it also is with me to this moment.
Yeah. I think that the choice to do black and white, it was on the nose, but I think it worked. It makes me wonder how lush some of the scenes might have looked if they were in color, especially since it's a period piece. But at the same time, I totally get the metaphor of shooting in black and white for this movie. So I don't really have anything bad to say about it. All right. So my number 9 is The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Really? Yep. Well, we're going to talk about it much later.
Much later. Oh, I kind of thought that.
Now I'm really interested in what your top 5 are.
Oh, yeah.
Because if that's 10 and 9,
I know,
good
right?
Lord.
Yeah.
Wow. You're starting off with a bang, man.
That's right. I mean, those were I kind of had to make sure I got Worst Person in the World in there. The movie that I almost forgot actually was Zola, and it's not on my top 10, and it didn't, and it's because I think it was initially shown in Sundance, January 2020. And then everything happened in 2020. And then so it got pushed so far, like a year and a half later.
Well, you're with the regular world because they counted that as Oscar worthy for this.
I think so. Yeah. And
it was nominated for quite a few things, not in the Oscars, but for quite a few other things.
It wasn't on my list because it didn't show up as a 2021 movie for a lot of things. And then finally I'm like, I know that and I started looking through like every movie that I watched over the last year instead of just movies that came out in 2021. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Zola. But it was a great experience. And we talked about it. We have a whole episode on it, but these other movies kind of rose above it. So, but it was right on the cusp there too.
Amazing. Okay. So my number, this is interesting. Teton is my number 9.
Oh yeah. That's not on my list. Let's talk about it.
It's not on your top 10 list at all?
No. It's not. I mean, it was an experience. We had a whole we had multiple episodes back and forth about that movie. And I don't know if you remember when I immediately my immediate reaction to it was like, should I be watching this? And I felt like it wasn't like I felt like somebody was telling me I shouldn't be watching it, but I just felt like, what am I extracting from this movie? And where am I in this experience? First of all, it's not Julia Ducournau's job to do that for me. So I'm not saying anything bad about her or why she would want to make this movie or any of that. I just felt like for me, this top 10 is movies that, number one, I'm excited to see again, because this past year I rewatched a bunch of movies I haven't seen in a long time. Paul Thomas Anderson movies and a couple other films that I just haven't seen in a long time. And then I've, of course, watched the movies that I've watched, like Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And, and it's just like, you watch those movies, just like and like we were talking about with West Side Story, all of those are Steven Spielberg movies. They have those last three, but I immediately want to watch them again. And Titan was the exact opposite experience for me as far as wanting to watch it again. It was something that was so visceral that I wanted to be away from it.
Okay, well, this might be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but you are planning on putting a video of us up eventually as we're recording it. And whether or not that happens or not, don't hold Josh to it. He's got
let us know if you want to see it. But yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. But I wish I could have seen my reaction to Titan not being on the list, because I thought for sure it was up there at number 1 or 2 at least, because you have and we talked about this, and I'm not sure if I answered your question. You asked me once, why do you think we watch challenging films? And I said truth and empathy, and I'm not exactly sure that was an answer to the question. And when I listened back to it, I'm not exactly sure I answered the question. I think I just in general answered a question about why I am attracted to certain movies. Challenging movies might be the thing for us because we watch so many things that when something is like Titan and the sexual act that happens in Titan happens, it's challenging to watch. It's not something you see on a regular basis. So maybe it's that kind of driving by an accident type of thing where you want to get through the traffic, but you definitely got to look over your shoulder and look to see what happened, just because I guess that's what humans do. So I'm not exactly sure that's an answer to your question about why we watch challenging films, but Titan is definitely a challenging film. And there are films that I instantaneously start to think about over and over and over again that haunt me throughout the rest of my life. Donnie Darko. I'm not necessarily talking about haunting, scary haunting, just always comes up somehow, some way. It always comes up. I just saw an article about Patrick Swayze and I immediately went to Donnie Darko. There are films like that. And then there are films like The Breakfast Club that I can quote every line, and that is my favorite movie of all time according to our lists. And I can't wait to watch it again, even if it's 10 minutes before it ends. If I turn it on, I've got to watch it. A lot of people's go-to movie for that is Forrest Gump. Titan is something different. I can't get that sexual act out of my head, and I don't know why. I am simultaneously interested, confused, not repulsed, but perplexed. What reality are we in here? And I like that. I like the fact that I can't describe it, that it made me feel something, maybe not the most comfortable feeling in the world, a little sick in the stomach feeling, not necessarily that scene, but I like the gender bending idea. I like the father taking care of the son. And then you've got the performances of Vincent Linden, and I think it's Gaith Rassel is the lead actress. There's something about that dance scene in the firehouse that I can't stop thinking about because it taps into something. And whether or not I can articulate it in language is a whole nother subject, but it tapped into something. I'm more surprised it's not on your list than I'm surprised that we're talking about it again, because it will be interesting for you to challenge yourself to try to watch it again.
Yeah. I think that during the movie, I was asking myself those questions, like the representation of specifically her as a main character and her sexualization, and why we may be thinking that is quote unquote wrong, or her relating to cars in that way, where as men can relate to cars in that way, they can personify a car, but she was literally personifying that car. And there's this questioning of the difference between men and women. And like you said, there gray areas that were explored in there, what makes a woman, what makes a man. And that's obviously in our country right now, that's a very charged thing. And that's not the thing that makes me not want to think about it. It's just that it's done in such an extreme manner that it's hard for me to know how confident the filmmaker is in that. Is it just like, I've got a lot of questions, I'm going to throw them all out at you, or I have a very specific view on this and I want for you to understand that view? And for me, the movie didn't necessarily land on that side. It was more of like, there's a lot of questions and here's a bunch of images and you think about it.
But you're a Kubrick fan.
Mm-hmm.
And Eyes Wide Shut is as elusive in themes as Teton is. Big time. 2001 is, you can ponder that and try to figure it out and question that, but all you come back with is more questions. I think I figured out the time traveling thing that happens to him, the man of all time. He sees all time at one time. You're living in, there is no time. You're living everything at once. But that confuses a lot of people. They're like, why is there a baby? And why is there an old man all of a sudden? What is all those like day glow, like 1970s colors? And I'm like, it was filmed in the 70s. But
1968.
Okay. Wow.
But that's close. Very close.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, round up.
Sure. Okay.
That's what they used to tell us in math class, right? 65, 66, it's 70. Anyway, Full Metal Jacket seems linear in nature as a narrative, but it's not, because it's going one place and then it goes a whole nother place, still in the same vein as the first place, but it ends up being something you're not expecting it to be. So how is it possible that
I don't have a problem with things not being what I expect them to be? I just, if I don't feel like there's a confident, I'm not even talking about narratives, in what they want to put out there. Like, I guess I didn't, and maybe I'm sure if I watched it again, I would probably glean a little bit more from the film. But it seemed like there were so many questions that it was hard for me to grasp onto what I'm supposed to glean from the movie itself.
That's fair. I have many questions myself. I love the fact that when the dance sequence happens, they're all feeling something they're not sure they're supposed to be feeling. I love that. I love that, because that allows a person to just be okay with having feelings. And then the movie ends on such a touching moment that true love is true love, period.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what it is that you love. True love is true love. And if it's the idea of what a human being should be, is not exactly how the movie ends, but that father loves deeply. Mm-hmm. And so I was shocked by that, because I thought it was going to be this like really avant-garde, confusing ending. And it's not. It's so touching and so sweet and so completely opposite of the rest of the film that I was like, yes. So every once in a while, all of a sudden I'll see the scene of her on top of the fire truck and all the guys in the blue and the purple lights. And all of a sudden I'll see the last scene. And it's just like little splatters of it go through my mind throughout my day. And I'm like, okay, Teton then.
There you go. Oh, that's so cool.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. My number 8 is West Side Story.
So is mine. We meet up.
Right.
We meet up finally.
I love this movie, and it's one of those movies I think I kind of want to have it on at all times, and it's in a lot of the movies that are kind of in my top 10. Music is a very big part of it, whether it's a bold score or whether it's a musical or whether it's just something that is inextricably linked to music in general. Then I think that this movie does a great job of, we just talked about it. I mean, it does a great job of updating something, but making it relevant, which I think the initial West Side Story did that for Romeo and Juliet. And maybe it's like a backdoor Shakespeare exposure type of a thing where, there's a whole litany of movies that have come out. 10 Things I Hate About You, She's the Man. I mean, it's like, oh, hey, guess what? You know that movie that has all the crazy cool high schoolers in it? Well, it turns out it's a Shakespeare play, that kind of a thing. But this West Side Story, everybody knows about West Side Story. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people know about West Side Story, and they know all the songs, and they know, when you're a jet all the way and all that stuff. But then you bring it into a kind of a cynical world, and, we're in, 2021, and can a musical like this really live? I mean, I think having Hamilton and In the Heights, I'm sure has helped to bring that, to bubble that back up to the surface, to where you can do a big production of something like West Side Story and get funding for it, especially when somebody like Steven Spielberg decides that he wants to commit to that. And it may not have even happened without Hamilton or without In the Heights, because at some point it was pretty much only animated movies that were musicals from whatever mid-90s to 5 years ago. So yeah, I mean, that I think is a confluence of events, but great performances, amazingly shot, perfectly sound designed, and you put all that stuff together and it gives you a dynamic musical that works now just as much as it did 60 years ago.
Yeah, I agree all the way down the line. I was house sitting for a friend, and they have Infinity, and Infinity is showing all the Academy Award nominated films. And I do like to watch them again after the awards. And I was like, okay, so this is going to be my third time watching West Side Story all the way through. Can I do it? Is it gonna be hard? Am I going to see stuff that I didn't see the first or second time, and it's going to start to ruin it a little bit? Nope. Not at all. From the opening sound to the ending, with that kind of Messiah walking thing through the fire escape, which of course is a big deal during their whole balcony scene. He can't see her through the grate, so he tries to climb up on it, which is so well done. It's so well done. Regardless of the music and the dancing, which is superb to begin with, everything is so well done. It's organized. You can tell that it's blocked and it's rehearsed, but it seems natural and organic because they had to film certain things certain way, of course, on the side of a fire escape, and how they did it, who knows, but it could be dangerous. So I'm sure there's some shots in there that weren't high up and whatever. I don't know how he did it. But
it's a set. Yeah, I heard Spielberg talk about it. It's all a set, but you can have dollies and cranes and stuff. Yeah, it's
right. But what I'm saying is that did they film all of that jumping around on that fire escape?
He was tethered. Ansel Elgort was tethered, and they painted it out later on. Yeah.
Yep. You can tell because there's this anxiety almost about him getting to her, and maybe the tension of him being high up, which was smart to do. Spielberg. My
Turns out he's pretty good at making movies.
He's a master, man. He is a master. The cinematography, which is Janusz Kaminski, I believe is how you say it. Janusz. One more time. Janusz. I can't say it. I'll get it. Kaminski is amazing. He does that kind of J.J. Abrams light flares thing when they're going behind the bleachers in that opening dance sequence, which is amazing. That whole sequence of them going into the hall is going to be talked about for years to come. And then you get to Ariana DeBose and you think to yourself, you're going to start picking it apart because now she's won the Oscar, deservedly so. And you think you're going to start picking it, seeing the wizard behind the curtains, not for a split second. Every single moment that touched me the first time and second time I saw it touched me a third time. I'm telling you, that moment in the beginning when she says, you think I'm going back to Puerto Rico and have 6 kids? She gets a lump in her throat. Listen very closely to it again. And it kills me every time. The performances are stunning. Mike Feist, we've talked about him a million times before, at least I have. It's just instantaneously a classic, infinitely watchable. And of course, it's a tragedy and it does not end well. And it's not a spoiler because, go back to 8th grade Shakespeare class. But when Spielberg and Tony Kirshner, who I wanted to mention a few seconds ago, but I was trying to pronounce Kaminski's name, did it that way. He did such a great job at making you understand things that you might not have understood from the stage production. Like, why is Maria there before Bernardo? It's not really explained. But she does say in this version, I've taken care of Dad for 5 years before you ever showed up. I'm a grown-up now. It gives it texture. It gives it layers. It just gives it this immense structure and layer upon layer when it comes to the character development. And then they give the quintessential love song to Rita Moreno.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so touching how she sings that. And I'm pretty sure there was a couple people disappointed with that because they wanted to see Maria and Tony sing it. And if they're smart, they'll put it on the reissue, have them record a version, the two actors who played Tony and Maria in this version. What's the lead actress's name?
Rachel Ziegler.
Rachel. I keep wanting to say Renee. It'd be nice to hear their version, but that simplified version of that song is so touching. And I have to say it again, and I'll end with this. Ariana DeBose had to perform that drugstore scene in front of the original person who won the Oscar for that drugstore scene. And I can't imagine the anxiety that must have given her, but she does it. I won't say she tops what Rita Moreno does because you can't really compare the two because they're both soul stirring, but it is amazing when she turns around and she says, Tilla Maria's dead. It's horrifying. It's Academy Award winning material as it was. So yeah, West Side Story.
All right. So my number 7 is Drive My Car.
We're going to talk about it later.
Talk about it later.
My number 7 is Parallel Mothers.
I got to watch that movie. Dang.
Yeah, you do have to.
7? I got to watch that.
Yeah, you have to watch it. The soundtrack's impeccable. The screenplay is impeccable. Pedro Almodovar has a way of layering things into his movies that at first you're like, wait, what's happening here? That doesn't make any sense. And then it all converges. And Penelope Cruz's performance and the scene they showed at the Oscars was perfect. I was like, oh no, please don't make me cry more at the Oscars. I can't deal with it in the best possible way. She's amazing in it. I'm just struck by how mostly in America, you have two narratives. You have the main plot and then you have maybe one or two subplots. It seems to be in other countries' films, you have a bunch of different plots that sometimes don't even converge. Sometimes they're just simple subplots that I guess the writer director wanted to make a point of. In this film, Parallel Mothers, what happens at the beginning of the film is as important to what's happening in the middle of the film is as important. It makes the ending. And you don't even realize it until you get there. And then also Milena Smith is the other young actress in it who plays the other mother. And she's amazing too. And if it was a top 10 Oscar nominated supporting actress performances, she would have been there. She'd probably been 6 or 7, if you had to list people, because she's amazing in this. And it's worth watching just for their two interactions. But there are some things that happen in this film that you're like, wait, slow down. And the score is intense. And the scene they showed at the Oscars, if you remember, had that daunting one note thing that was going on in the score. And I was like, oh, it's going to do it to me. And it's a 5-second clip. Okay, keep going. So yeah, number 7, Parallel Mothers.
All right. Okay. My number 6 is No Time to Die. I'm guessing
Let's talk about it.
Not on your list.
No, but I knew it was going to be on your list.
Well, I mean, come on. I'm such a James Bond apologist that I can't. And also, I think that what they've done with the Daniel Craig Bonds, even though they pretty much kept with using different people directing each of the films, having Daniel Craig be a part of the producing team, I think gives a kind of a codified view of what they wanted to do with the character. There's all kinds of things you can go back to, like Quantum of Solace, which is pretty much the one that everybody hates the most. And you can talk about how it just wasn't, it wasn't written at all because of the writer's strike of 2011. And they just had to kind of like figure it out on the set, which is a horrible way to make a movie. And there's other things you could talk about these movies. But I think if you look at all of the Daniel Craig films as a whole, I think you do get an interesting character study, which is not something that people will expect out of James Bond movies. And so you have to figure out how to land that plane. And I think that No Time to Die did as well as it could landing that plane. And there may be certain things that I don't necessarily think had to happen in this film to make it satisfying, but I think they didn't detract. I'm talking about specific plot points or results of interactions between certain characters are trying to be very vague here without spoiling the film. But I'm just excited to see Daniel Craig as James Bond again, especially knowing that he's not going to be James Bond ever again. So that was exciting. The score is amazing. Hans Zimmer again. Like, it was the first time he's done a Bond score, but just another Hans Zimmer score, and he's able to like do his own thing with it, but then also make it work. The title sequence, Billie Eilish, Oscar award winning song, rightfully so, and being able to have certain characters back again and kind of having everybody there. They went from like tearing it all down in Casino Royale to like it being as Bondy as they can get it in this film. They've figured out ways to get the gadgets in there and the DB5 and all that stuff. So it just works. Even relating back to Vesper Lind, he visits her grave or her mausoleum at the beginning of the film. I mean, it's just like they're really trying to put a cap on this thing, and I think it works. It works for me at least.
Well, is Bondy in the dictionary, by the way? I'm just wondering. Yeah, Bondy. I have enough trouble with these names. Don't give me more English language twists. Here's what I'll say about it. It's the one I remember the most. As you're talking about it, I can remember the opening sequence. I can remember the sequence where they have to jump. He has to jump over the wall and the mausoleum explodes. I remember almost everything. And we've talked about this before. It's not that that's an indication that it's a good movie or a bad movie. Just some things sit with me for the 2.5 hours or 2 hours that I'm in the movie theater, and I have a great time. Mission Impossible does this. The Bond movies do this, but then they're gone. And not to the point where if it comes on, I'll remember I watched it, but I could not tell you what happens next in the film unless I've watched it a couple times. Like, I grew up with just Sean Connery ending and Roger Moore starting. So I saw more Roger Moore. I saw more Roger Moore films in the theater than I have any other James Bond. And I might remember some things that happened next in the Roger Moore films because I saw them in the theater as a young adult, if you will. But for whatever reason, they don't stick. But this one, as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And that whole sequence, that Ana de Armas.
Oh my gosh, such a great.
Yeah.
It's like a diversion, but it works. Like, it's a diversion from the film, but it's such a good. They've got set pieces. That's the problem, is that you expect James Bond set pieces, but they're still able to make it work in the film. And that's what I think that, it's like, we want to go here, we want to go there, we want to go to Jamaica, we want to go to Sweden, or Norway, I think. It's like, we want to go to Italy, but then it just, they make it work within the structure of the James Bond character arc. And that's something that Bond never had. The Roger Moore movies, the reason why you don't remember them is because every movie is essentially the same, and they just go, it's just set piece to set piece to set piece, and the character doesn't change ever. But in these Daniel Craig ones, the character changes, even if it's incrementally, very slowly. He still changes over 5 movies or 6 movies, I guess. So,
well, there's also character development in minor characters. Speaking of Ana
de Armas,
just lost.
Yeah.
Thank you. When she's very confident, but also this is her first mission, which I'm not exactly sure that's the truth of that. But yeah, I don't know about that. But it's kind of the giddiness she gets from it and the excitement she gets from it. And then she's a little frightened at one point, and then she's a little overconfident, and it kind of overtakes her. And, that's a kick-ass scene. It just is. I get why you like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So my number 6 is Dune.
Talking about that later.
Arrakis. I figured.
My number 5 is Coda.
What a special movie.
It is. And I think for me, like, I'm more of a sucker for not musicals, but music-based films, or like movies that have music performance built into them. In like, this is the non-musical music films, even like something that's like Pitch Perfect or something. So like, I am willing to give Pitch Perfect a much longer rope. If music is integrated into the film, like, I don't really care what else is a part of the film. Like, I'm at least interested in watching it and in experiencing the performances and how the characters interact and how the music is interwoven into the narrative. And so this movie, it's not interwoven into the narrative. It's integral to the film. And you've said more about it than I think, and you've said it actually really well, is that it's such a basic movie. It shouldn't be this good. Like, it should just be like a, it's like a great after school special, but it's so much better. People were on their A game, and it's bringing in an extra added element of the deaf community and American Sign Language and children of deaf adults, which is what CODA can stand for. It can also be a musical term. So, it's all down the line. Like, there's all these little like boxes that it ticked, but it didn't tick them purposefully, I don't think. I really don't think so. It's not like they were trying to make a movie that ticked a bunch of boxes. It was just a dynamic story that they got the right people in the right places and made it work really well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I still can't understand how simple of a movie it is and how narrative-wise we've seen it a million times.
Yeah.
Literally, I think the scene where you meet your school crush and walk through the woods and dive off a cliff into a river has been done. You know what? I wish I knew somebody like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory who could just go and look at the internet and figure that out and statistically break that down, because I'm sure it's in 1 out of 10 movies or some weird statistic like that. But for whatever reason, and it's probably the performances, and I don't know, Sean Hayter just picked the right moments. When she shot what was written, she picked the right moments. And statistically, it's a very interesting trivia question now, because what CODA did at the Oscars has not been done since 1930. The film with the least nominations won the most awards for that film. So in other words, Dune was nominated for 9. It won 6. That's the most that one film won that night. Everything else, like Power of the Dog, was nominated for 11 or 12 or something. Yeah. It won 1. 1, all the way down the line. CODA was nominated for 3 and won all 3.
Yep.
It is historically relevant because it is the second motion picture helmed by a female director to win Best Picture. Importante. Very importante.
Mm-hmm.
Very significant. And I will never get over the audition scene ever. And if I instantaneously want to feel good and cry and get an ugly cry out, but still feel good about myself, that's the moment. And there was something in me that was a little cynical when I was watching. I was like, they would never be allowed in that balcony and they would never be allowed to watch it. But when she starts to sign the song, I was like, I don't care what the rules are here. I'm just going there, just thinking about it. It is a beautifully, simply told story. And I'm glad that it broke these statistics and these. You can no longer say the film with the most nominations wins Best Picture. The film with the Best Director wins Best Picture. You can know film editing. It's all those statistics that everybody tries to base everything on. And I usually go, I don't know. Your rules are made to be broken, and there's an exception to all rules. And this is the exception to most every rule when it comes to accolades this year. And I love that.
No, that is cool. Your number 5.
Drive My Car.
All right, let's talk about it. That's my number 7.
That's your number 7. I don't know what else I can say about it. It was profound. It was soul-stirring. The performances are stunning. The idea of the film was captivating. Most people might have a problem with the 3-hour length. I actually was like, I don't care. I can go another hour in this world. I just can. When they go and see her life, without saying too much, in the snow, is amazing.
Yep.
There's an amazing moment. And I joked about not watching Uncle Vanya on PBS, and the whole thing is about Uncle Vanya. And apparently you do learn more things about the film knowing that play. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't know that play. And I do have it taped, but I have not watched it. I'm embarrassed to say that. But now it's got to happen. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch that PBS great performance of Uncle Vanya with Toby Jones. And yeah, those things are great. PBS has got it down. That's the station. I'm going to watch that, and then I'm going to watch Drive My Car again.
Yeah.
And see what I think.
That's, the cool part about that is that, a lot of times, especially if you like watch a movie and then you know that it's based on a book and you read the book and then you watch the movie again and there may be certain things, little Easter eggs that were in the book that are referenced in the movie, but the movie didn't have time to do that. But that's what I'm kind of expecting from Drive My Car, where there's probably some sort of like subplot, like a total like undercurrent of Drive My Car that either parallels Uncle Vanya or there's a tie that interweaves them, and they're inextricably linked, and it's one of those things where it's like there's no way you could have put another play in that place, like even another like Chekhov play in place of Uncle Vanya in Drive My Car. Like it had to be that play and that moment for that actor. But for me, the coolest part about Drive My Car was that I wasn't expecting to get to character journeys in the film. I was only expecting to get his character journey. But once that there's certain scenes that open you up to the driver character, and you get this unexpected. It's like initially I was going to say, oh, it's a bonus, but it's like, no, it is a necessary journey that they both take together, and that's so much cooler than just some guy like getting over things that happened in the past. And that was the movie this year that, I mean, it was the closest I've come to a Captain Phillips moment in years, I think, because there's a scene close to the end of the film. I mean, it was during the Uncle Vanya performance, but it got me, man. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Right now? Are you serious? I can't believe that I'm so wrapped up in this film because once again, like, I mean, I've never seen Uncle Vanya. I didn't know what it was about, but just, I'd been on this journey, and I think you're right. Like being on a 3-hour long journey with this character, it gets you more entrenched in what's going on in his life and throughout that time. And the writer director is
Hamaguchi.
Risuke Hamaguchi, and he and his writing partner, they know what to show, what not to show, how to keep you involved in this character's life, and the most impactful scenes, and how to tie all those together. And there's just some haunting scenes. The scene with him and his lead actor in the back of the car. I mean, that is just, it's powerful.
It will be talked about as the film that went without any acting nominations, and how could we have forgotten? In years to come, that scene in particular is mesmerizing, and that actor, and I feel kind of blessed because on IMDb, a lot of those actors don't have their pictures up, so I can't tell who's what, who's who, and I can't pronounce their names anyway. No disrespect, but I'm not even going to try. Yeah. It took me forever to get Hamaguchi. I still can't get his first name, but I will eventually. I'm determined to give that man the respect he deserves. But that scene in particular, and then the scene that you were just talking about, and then you texted me a picture of it. Yep. And it instantaneously came back, and it will be the performance of the unsung deaf person, because Coda is going to be remembered for it being a family, and Troy Kotsur winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Mm-hmm. And in 30 plus years, a deaf person has not won. And we had Sound of Metal last year. Yeah. And then we have Troy Kotsur's performance winning, and Marlene Matlin being the actress who won for Children of a Lesser God, and being the first deaf woman and any person to win the Oscar. That was a lead acting Oscar. But the young lady who is, I hate to refer to her as only the deaf person in the film, but it is a very distinctive part and very distinctive character trait, for lack of a better term, an important moment. And I've been in auditions like this, when somebody walks in and they have no leg and they have a prosthetic, and you're thinking, oh, well, that can't be this person because they have crutches and that'll be weird. But then they end up being the best Ghost of Christmas Past that you've ever had in The Christmas Carol because of that, because it's so original and beautiful that this person, and I'm not talking about overcoming a handicap. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that we get to see a character in a different light because of that person, what that person brings to it. And we will talk about Coda, and eventually we'll get to the point where we go, oh yeah, but in Drive My Car, there's another character that went unsung.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene that you're talking about in particular, and then the scene between her and the other actress.
Oh my gosh. In the rehearsal.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's
my God,
and it's away from the other actors in the rehearsal, but we get to see their interaction. It's so well done. Great, well
Beyond.
shot. It's the whole thing is amazing. So yeah, if you haven't seen Drive My Car, oh my gosh, that's the one I think a lot of people are gonna sleep on. But
Everything rises.
Yeah.
Everything rises, and in due time, it didn't do bad for itself.
No, that's true. Yeah.
It didn't do bad for itself. It's just like film lovers saw that movie.
Yeah.
People will eventually see that movie. It's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for them to see it.
My number 4 is Spider-Man No Way Home. So we go from Drive My Car to Spider-Man No Way Home. And there's a good reason. Because
I love it.
For me, this is the Spider-Man movie I didn't know I needed. This is the Marvel movie I didn't know I needed, because I didn't even know that we were watching a Spider-Man origin story until we saw it. And that was it. I mean, it's so well done. And it was the one thing that like got me excited about the MCU again, about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because we've had the Hawkeye show, and we've had the Captain America and whatever, the
Winter
Falcon
Soldier.
and Winter Soldier, and we've had all the shows, and Loki was good. I mean, it was fun and it was interesting and dynamic, but I just felt like this was something that actually did get me excited for like what could happen later, and also was able to give the Spider-Man character an actual backstory, which we were so excited when we saw Spider-Man Homecoming that it was just like, he's already Spider-Man. Or when we saw Civil War, Captain America Civil War, it's like, oh, look, he's already Spider-Man. And like, we just move on. But the character development is not necessarily something that you would expect even from the 3 Spider-Man movies. I just felt like this movie was so much more refreshing, and it took a lot more chances than most other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies do. And I mean, it wasn't necessarily like, I don't think it was necessarily a perfect movie, but I think it was a lot gutsier than most of the other MCU movies, and not gutsy in a comedy way like Thor Ragnarok was, but gutsy in a trying to make you feel something way.
All right. I have one statement and then I have one question. My statement is, I saw it in the movie theater. It came out on demand. We paid $20 to watch it with my 12-year-old and 13-year-old nephew. Hey man, it's cheaper than a night at the movies.
Definitely.
If you think about it. We just went and saw Morbius. That was a $50 night.
Yeah.
So actually more than that. That's okay. That's what the movies are about. And then we put up the big screen because the next night was nice, a little chilly, lit a fire outside and watched it again. We had as much fun the first time as we did the second time. And to watch my nephews see the Venom scene at the end was great. They just both turned to me like, wait, is that now in his universe? I said, I think it is. And he goes, oh. And you could see their mind just spinning about the possibilities of what that meant. And actually, I feel like I'm still 12 on some level. There's a lot of people who might agree with that too. But when it comes to suspension of disbelief for movies, so I'm always, when anything's happening. But there is a cynical nature to my adulthood. So I'm like, okay, really, the Statue of Liberty again. The Statue of Liberty where they take the green patina down and rub it off and make it bronze again, and then put a Captain America shield. Really? But that's all in the movie too. There's a whole radio show about the Captain America shield. Do we really need this, folks? There's a whole thing in there. So that takes care of that. And I said to my nephew, I was like, really, did it have to be like the polished, perfect version of the Statue of Liberty? And he turns to me, he goes, well, that's how it looked when it came from France. And I was like, okay. I'm completely resolved over this cynical adult take on this because that's how he saw it. So yeah, it's a great film. I'll watch it again and again.
Oh yeah, me too.
All right. So my number 4, is that where we're at?
Mm-hmm.
The worst person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what else to say about this film. I just don't know what else to say. It was challenging in places. vague, elusive, but she's amazing. The lead actress, I don't know what else to say about it. It filled me with joy. And there are some sequences in this movie that are not joyful at all. There's quite a few things that are not joyful at all in this film. And then our conversation about what's cheating and what's not cheating, and what I thought was cheating, what you're not cheating. Yeah. It's fascinating that two people.
I think it's good. It's a good episode. Yeah. So definitely. Yeah.
Well, I just find it fascinating that we're a lot alike on some levels. And then there's a lot of qualities that we have that are just ourselves. But our moral compasses seem to be in sync on most things, you know? The whole 10 Commandments thing. I'm cool with all those, right? But what I'm trying to say is that for whatever reason, my moral compass in that cheating, and I use finger quotes on purpose because that's chapter of the film is called cheating, didn't strike me as cheating, but to you it did. And that's interesting to me, that I just thought that the significant others would be happy that they made a human connection with another person. That's how I saw it. And I know that that's like weird and not right on some level, but that's, yes, I don't know how I would go home to my girlfriend and say I peed in front of another girl and she be okay with that. I'm not sure that that would be something I could handle, but luckily I'll never be in that situation. Not the peeing in front of somebody, the girlfriend situation. Anyway, what does this movie not have? It's got an intriguing main character that is layered. The subplots are amazing. The narrative is amazing. There's like a weird trippy sequence, not weird trippy. It is tripping, literally. And at the end of it, it's life affirming. And I was not going into this movie, especially a movie called The Worst Person in the World, to be life affirming. And yet it was. It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I think for me, the big thing with this movie is the writing, and the performances are great. But I think that just we're in, I mean, we just got done talking about the 30th Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. So, you know, it's like based on a character who was made up in the 1960s. So this movie is its own thing. It came out of nothing, and it was, I'm sure it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different character traits or people that the writers Joachim Trier and Eskelvoet, that they came across or dealt with or had experiences of their own, but they were able to codify it into a solid screenplay. I think one of the best screenplays of the year, one of the best original screenplays of the year. And I think that they did it justice. They did the screenplay justice with how the film was shot and directed by Joachim Trier. And so I am excited to go back and see the other films in his, I guess it's the Oslo trilogy that is not necessarily connected to each other. There aren't characters that are connected to each other, but it's just kind of centered around the capital city of Oslo. And this is the third of those movies. So yeah, I'm interested.
Do you have the IMDb list of the character or the cast up?
Yeah, Renata Reinsve is who you are referencing,
Renata.
And then
Renata.
Your dude is Herbert Nordrum. He was Ivan.
He's the man.
And then Axel is her first boyfriend, which is Anders Danielsen Lie, Lie. I don't know how to say it.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, so those three, it was pretty much a three-hander, but yeah, it was it's very well done. All
that
three
dude's the man. Watch, I'm telling you, watch. He's going to show up somewhere in some American film, and he's going to sweep everybody away, and everybody's going to be like, "Where did he come from?" Watch, especially if he has like that really cool Norwegian accent, because that's like English interpreted by a Norwegian person is a little less harsh to the ear than some other.
It makes me wonder if it's going to be kind of like Stellan Skarsgård, because, you know, he just can't get rid of his accent, really. He tries, but I don't think he can. Now, he's Swedish. He's not Norwegian, but they're both on the same kind of peninsula there. So, alrighty. Let's move on to number 3. My number 3 is The Power of the Dog.
Mine is too.
All right. See, I knew it was coming up soon for you.
Once again, what else is there to say? The movie is powerful, and I know it's called The Power of the Dog, but it's powerful, and it is daunting in the best kind of way. It is purposefully paced. I'm sick of hearing people talk about how slow and nothing happens. You just need to readjust to the movie. We've talked about this quite a few times on the podcast. that what we're expecting from a film and what we get from a film might be two entirely different things, and that our observation of the film was tainted by our expectations of the film or by a trailer or something else. You have talked many times about not seeing certain trailers because you don't want to have any idea, and I think that's a good way to be. I just wish that we could get to a point where we adjust to the film's pace, not what we think the film's pace should be. And I say we as in general, because sometimes I do that. Not that often. But this movie is purposely paced, and it's worth it because it's about those. I realized it's about the beginning of a scene and the end of a scene, not the middle of a scene. So the scene they showed for Kirsten Dunst was the scene where Benedict Cumberbatch and Cody Smith McPhee take off and go off. And she goes over to Jesse Plemons and she goes, where are they going? He goes, well, they're going to go. I don't want him to do that. I don't want him to do that. That's like the beginning of a scene. And then you never really see the middle of that scene. Then you see the end of it as she turns back around and she's all flustered. It's interesting what Jane Campion did. And we talked about this on the podcast about the power of the dog. It's what she chose to show you, which is what is powerful in this movie. And it took on a life of its own during the Oscars. And I hate that films and actors, and I know it's all an industry game on some level, and I know that there's a narrative that is spun from actors and actresses to be part of this. They have to go out there and campaign for it. I don't understand that, but I accept it. I mean, I'm not anywhere near something like that, so I wouldn't even understand the expectations you would have. But to campaign for something is a little weird to me, but I also understand it. And then all of a sudden, instead of just loving that Coda might be the best picture and that The Power of the Dog still a great cinematic piece of art, they had to bash on The Power of the Dog in order to promote other things that were coming up, and the narrative had to change. And there's a whole article, might be the New York Times, I'm not sure, the gap, the big divide between critics and audiences, and how critics were blown away by The Power of the Dog. But then when the narrative about The Power of the Dog being the best picture of the year, people were tearing it down and pulling it apart. And I keep trying to help people. You heard about all this excitement about this movie. Then you go see it, and it's nothing like what you're expecting. That's not the film's problem. And it's not really a problem. That's just how we humans are sometimes. And so readjust your expectations, because it's a beautiful film. And I just have to state for the record that they showed the Jesse Plemons scene.
They did. I was when I was watching it, I was like, I told Steph, I was like, oh man, Paul's so excited right now.
Dude, I couldn't even watch it.
Yeah.
I put my head down and just listened, because it's such a, and then I tweeted it out the other day, 2 pictures from that actual scene. And so I think it's just like Brokeback Mountain, not because it's a Western, not because there are gay themes to it. That's irrelevant to this film and that film. What it is it's cinematic art, and people will come back to it and realize this really was great, because that's how they talk about Brokeback Mountain now, that it really is cinematic art. And Jane Campion historically is the 3rd woman to win Best Director, and historically back-to-back women won Best Director. So that's an amazing thing. I wish it had won a few more, but I understand why it didn't. And not that that's relevant to anything, because the categories that it was nominated in is beautiful. The cinematography is beautiful, and the screenplay is beautiful, and the ending is stunning and heart-pounding. And you know how they say when you get ready to die, your life flashes before your eyes? When he reaches underneath the bed, I'm just going to leave it at that. Everything in the film flashed backwards. And I saw it all again in a split second. I was like, oh, whoa. And then it was over. And I was like, this is good. This was good. It was an experience.
Yeah. And I think that, that's the big thing that I wanted to say, is that this movie is a capital F film, and it is able to handle the responsibility of that, like all of the pomp and circumstance of that, and deliver on that. So there are movies that try to be these types of, I don't know, I don't even want to say, like, it's not highbrow art, but it is curated art, and it is meant to be seen as a piece of art. And I mean, you can make the argument for James Bond movies being a piece of art too. Like that's a totally different thing. But I think that with this film, it puts people in the right spaces to take advantage of all the things that they've been interested in up to this point, whether it's Johnny Greenwood's score, Ari Wegner's cinematography style, and how she's able to be so adept to go from Zola to this film and make it hers. And same thing with, Jane Campion being interested in the dynamics between men and women, and men in the 1920s in Montana, and just trying to figure out, how the relationship between men and women has changed or stayed the same, and exploring that and being willing to explore that, and what is expected of you, and what is acceptable for a man's behavior and what is not acceptable for a man's behavior. All of that is, you can tell that she's that's just entrenched in her films in general. And even in her, Top of the Lake and other things that she's been involved in, even since her last film, which was whatever, like 2004 or something. It was a long time ago. But so yeah, and the other thing that it did for me is it got me to go back and watch The Piano, which I'd never had a real reason or care to watch. But, I saw Power of the Dog and I was like, okay, so I've just been sleeping on Jane Campion, so I got to go back. So, and that's kind of what the fact that you've got Parallel Mothers so high on your list, like I've never seen a Pedro Almodovar film.
Never seen Voltaire?
Nope.
Oh, dude.
Nope.
You've never seen, Talk to Her? Oh, dude.
Yeah. I've never seen Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. I've never seen,
Vanilla Sky, Wake Up.
Well, that was Abre los Ojos.
No. I'm making a comment about the line.
Because it is, Penelope Cruz was in that movie and in Vanilla Sky. So
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Anyway,
no corresponding. Just the open your eyes part.
Yeah. No. I need to get on.
Bad timing of that reference. That was bad timing, but it was a good reference. It was a good good point. And I do want to say this because we don't talk about things like this, and I'm glad we don't. But I do have to say, Sam Elliott apologized, and he sincerely apologized. And for people who know what happened, they know what happened, and he is embarrassed and upset with himself about what he said about the power of the dog, but he sincerely teared up and apologized, and good for him. Good for him. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to go into it. For people who know what I'm talking about, grown men apologizing is a good thing, and he needed to, and he did. And so
nice.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Well, my number 2 is Dune.
Desert Planet, Arrakis.
There's a trend in my list of writer-directors. We just talked about one, Power of the Dog, with Jane Campion. We've got Coda on there with Sean Hayter, Drive My Car, and Tragedy Macbeth, and Worst Person in the World. All of those are writer-directors. So that right there, I think this movie, it doesn't look, it doesn't feel, it doesn't have, you're not going to have the same experience if you didn't have such a fanboy in Denis Villeneuve at the helm of this thing. And it sounds like he got all of his buddies who are also big fanboys. There's like this whole, the interviews I've heard with Hans Zimmer talking about it, and with Denis Villeneuve talking about it, how they just like totally geek out on Dune, on the novel. And they both like imagined when they were younger, being able to even see a really great film version of that book, and being able to be a part of the making of that. Like that's got to be insane for them. So that it's really cool that they're probably more excited about making the movie than most people were watching the movie. And then the fact that people were so excited and it got such a great reception, that right there, I think has got to be, awesome for them. It's such a fun movie, and it is such a complete experience, whether it's the sound design or the Hans Zimmer score. The acting is fine, but I think that for me, it's more about the environment. It's more about the set design and just like immersing yourself in this world, and in this world that I haven't seen before. I hadn't seen the 1984 movie. the David Lynch movie. I hadn't read the book, and so like all of this was new to me, and I was soaking it in. I mean, it's the closest I could get to seeing Star Wars for the first time in a theater, that kind of a thing. So like I never got that experience. I just saw Star Wars on HBO. Like that's where I saw it, and we taped it, and I just rewatched it a bunch. That's how I experienced Raiders of the Lost Ark, my favorite movie of all time. So I've never gotten that experience, but this is as close as I can get, and it worked. So yeah, I loved it.
I saw it on HBO Max first. No. Did I see it in the theater?
I saw it on HBO Max. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I did. And then I watched it again. And then I was house sitting and they're showing all those Oscar films. And that's the first one that I chose to watch. I was like, oh, of course I can watch Dune again. There's no way a rewatching of that is going to denigrate anything that I've seen before or interrupt anything. Like I was saying with West Side Story, is it going to make me see the holes or the wizard behind the curtain? No, not at all. It's beautifully shot. The cinematography is gorgeous. The production design, which by the way, full disclosure, I predicted everything right for the Oscars except for production design and Best Picture.
Dang.
I thought Nightmare, I know, right? Ba-boom, with the biggest one. And I didn't even have Coda as a possibility. Oh. I had The Power of the Dog, with the surprise being West Side Story, and my pick would have been Drive My Car. My vote would have been Drive My Car. That said, Dune won like 6 out of its 9, and it did win production design, which after watching it a third time, especially in HD in this big screen that my friends had, I was like, oh my goodness, why? And I had already watched Nightmare Alley again and convinced myself watching that, that's the production. That's the one that should have won. Then I watched Dune and I was like, yeah, shut up, Paul. Because it's amazing how there's subtleties there. Their emblems on their uniforms and the Fremen still suits. There's just texture to everything.
It reminds me of Blade Runner, like the original Blade Runner. Like every little thing, there's stickers on things and there's aged stuff, just like there's stuff getting rained on. It's just, you feel like you're in a totally different world, and that you're supposed to, and Dune obviously, but it feels lived in, I guess. Yeah.
I love the idea of their spacecrafts that are going to take them to a whole nother galaxy, come from under the water. So they have a whole station under the water of submerged spacecrafts. I don't even know if that's the right...
You gotta have a place to store them, It's like their garage.
Yeah, right. Well, Bruce Wayne does it, so why not? So here's my story about Dune. So we're watching the Oscars. I'm with my 12-year-old nephew, Elijah, and he's kind of into it, he doesn't really understand it. He's like, what is the big deal? And then he sees Zendaya, and he's like, why is Zendaya there? She's pretty. And I was like, yeah, she's beautiful. Look, she looks good. Look at that. That's so modern. And like, he's all into it all of a sudden, right? And of course, she is a Nickelodeon star, right? Original or Disney star, one of the two.
Yeah.
And so he knows her from those things, growing up with those things. And then he starts to watch the Oscars, and Dune is winning left and right. Dune, 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 Dune. He goes, what is this Dune? And I go, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's a sci-fi movie. He goes, sci-fi? Zendaya's in it? And I was like, yeah. And another Oscar win, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, I'm going to go watch it right now. I was like, well, we have HBO Max. He leaves the Oscars, gets up to go watch Dune. He has a bedtime of 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock comes, he has to go to bed. He's so disappointed that he has to turn the movie off. He woke up early on purpose, set his phone alarm to wake up at 5:30 so he could finish watching Dune before he went to school. And I go to wake him up and I go, have you been up all night? He goes, no, I woke up. I set my alarm on my phone to get up at 5:30. I go, why? And he goes, I just had to finish this movie. And I said, what did you think? And he was like, Dune. He was just overwhelmed by it. And I think it was like Star Wars. I think it was his Star Wars. I think he had that same experience. So if Denis Villeneuve can do that to us and to a 12-year-old and tell a story that's so complex that it takes 1,000 pages to tell it, he told that story extremely well. The only thing Elijah said was like, wait a second, they kind of fool you, but you don't really realize it's in part 1. I go, yeah, a lot of people had a problem with that.
At the beginning, but
yeah. I think he was a little bit in denial about it. I think he wanted it to, he goes, but they're going to make a part 2. And I said, well, there was talk about them not having enough money to do it. And he goes, what? didn't it just win a gazillion Oscars? And I said, that has solidified the green
Sure.
lighting effect for. And they're saying now that once part 2 comes out, that it might have a Lord of the Rings effect and be nominated for like 12 awards and win all of them.
Yeah.
That Denis Villeneuve will finally get his Oscar, even though he was not nominated this year, which is perplexing but complicated.
He was nominated for a DGA though.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the DGA gets it right.
Yeah,
They
I
do.
think so.
Not that the Oscars get it wrong, but anyway, so Dune, amazing.
You're number 2.
Mass.
Yeah. Nice.
It's the one movie that has not left me on any level at all. I have to force myself not to think about it. I have to force myself to get it out of my head because it's a very complicated, complex, adult in a mature adult way, not adult film way, film that tackles a subject that I didn't even know could be tackled. I didn't know that this could be a story idea. And it is Fran Kranz, by the way. You were right. It's a character study, but it's about this multi-layered subject that I don't know anybody who would want to take it on as a subject matter to write a movie about it. But Fran Kranz did, and he did it well. And then the performances, I have praised Martha Plimpton left and right. Should have been on the Best Supporting Actress list. That will be talked about years from now. Mark my words. It will be a missed Oscar nomination years from now. No doubt about it. And people go kind of crazy about that around Oscar time. What should have been nominated, what got nominated, who should take their Oscar, who shouldn't have taken their Oscar, whatever. Ann Dowd has one of the best scenes of her life, and that's saying a lot because it's Ann Dowd.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot. And then you have Reed Birney, who's traditionally a stage actor. We've seen him on other films, but he could very easily have the thankless part in the film. He could just be the husband of Ann Dowd. But there are layers and textures to his point of view that are not necessarily what his wife thinks. And when she's being polite, he's not being polite at certain points. And then the roles reverse at other points. And so it's complicated. And then Jason Isaac, which most people know him from the Harry Potter films, has this incredible monologue that is an actor's dream and an actor's nightmare all at the same time because it's so powerful. And I think he just learned the lines and let it go because it's impactful. And it's a one room set and it stays in there the whole entire time with the exception of some kind of kinetic, frenetic beginnings of the film. And then the last shot of the film, I don't even know what to say about it. I don't even know what to say about it. It is, luckily, this film has caught on and people who love movies have seen it and it will keep burning. It will keep burning. I'm sure a year from now, somebody's going to call me and go, have you seen this movie Mass? Oh my gosh. I'm sure of it. Do I want to experience it again? Yes, I do. Only because of all of the reasons that I just talked about, but I'm also a little scared to watch it again. I don't know if I can go back into that world right now. Not anytime soon, that's for sure. And I don't know if I can handle the ending anytime soon. I can't handle Ann Dowd. I can't handle Martha Plimpton right now. And I certainly can't handle that last shot right now. I just know I can't, in the best sense of that. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm just saying it's so powerful to me that I did that thing where my toes were crunched up the whole entire time I was watching the movie. And I didn't even realize it until after the movie was over with. And my feet kind of hurt and my fingers kind of hurt. And I realized because I was balling my fist up during it. It's so intense and so tense. It's a beautifully done movie.
Yeah. You got me turned on to that. And yeah, you're right. I think it's so actor centered that for me, there's less for me to grab onto, but what Fran Kranz does is he kind of shepherds you through the film by changing the setting, by changing the angles. It kind of reminded me of 12 Angry Men, how Sidney Lumet, this first movie he'd ever done. I mean, this is Fran Kranz's first feature-length film. So in that way that they're very similar. But the way that Sidney Lumet changed the angle of the camera, the height of the camera in that one room of 12 Angry Men. I mean, it's a very similar thing where you have this one setting. How do you make the filmmaking dynamic? Fran Kranz figured out a way to do that also by keep putting people in different areas, by changing the aspect ratio, by figuring out how to represent the emotions of each of the people visually, and trying to keep things fresh, I think, which is, it's sad that you can't just like sit there and have people around a table talk about something that's very serious and make that dynamic, but make just the subject matter dynamic. But I think that it did help the audience to get through it by utilizing the tricks that he did. And so, yeah, that made me appreciate it even more.
Tough movie, but it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I hope? I hope it helps somebody.
Yeah.
I think it has. I think it can. I think it will. I think it probably already has. People who are involved in the subject matter.
Or even like there's also an empathy that hopefully can be gleaned from the film too, where it gets you to challenge. There are so many things nowadays where you're just like, oh, well, this is my view on this. Right. I come down hard on this side of this
right.
issue. And it's like, if there's anything that can get you to kind of open up to other people's experiences and other instances that may be a little bit more complicated than what you might think is a cut and dried situation, then that's always good. Complexity is difficult to handle mentally and emotionally, but it's necessary.
Well, you often talk about the nuance of an article or the nuance of a conversation or whatever it may be. And in many of the reviews of Mass, it mentions one character who you don't see on screen, who you would never turn a sympathetic ear to or never think you would turn a sympathetic ear to, but there's nuance there. And that there are reasons why the grief is real for that person too. And that's not to say that to justify or to excuse somebody's behavior or what they choose to do that causes tragedy, but there is nuance to why the person did what they did.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow. But when you have those four actors sitting around, forget it. I'm in.
Let's lighten up the mood a little bit and talk about a movie from, well, it was from last year, but set in the 1970s. It's a little film I like to call Licorice Pizza. And it's my number one movie of the year. So
I'm not surprised.
I mean, come on. It's Paul Thomas Anderson, and it's a joy of a film. And I think that I keep coming back to this, like it's something that I didn't know that I needed, but like I feel like I'm so interested in the subject matters that Paul Thomas Anderson gravitates towards. And it's these types of things where it's just like, I didn't know you could make a movie about that and make it that dynamic. Like when I heard that he was going to make a quote unquote Scientology movie and it turned out to be The Master, it's just kind of like, what? How did he take his experiences with people who are involved in Scientology and translate that into a movie that is very adjacent to actual Scientology, but more interested in the actual characters? And this is a coming of age film about about an adult 24/whatever-year-old woman, and then a teenager who's had more life experience at 16 than most other 16-year-olds. And so that is something I didn't like. It in some ways it could be considered a third rail, and there have been talks about that, but Paul Thomas Anderson's able to imbue it with a sense of just kind of frivolity and an openness to possibilities and just low stakes. Whereas nowadays there's so many high stakes. People don't let their kids go out and play in the neighborhood anymore. And it's that kind of thing. Whereas he never went to school. Like you never see that kid in school except for the very first scene where he's getting his picture taken and he meets Alana. But yeah, it's the whole movie is about all the things they do when they're not in school. And so it's just a kind of a totally different setup. It's got great soundtrack, amazing performances that, from non-actors from Cooper Hoffman and from Alana Haim. I mean, from the whole Haim family, actually. So yeah, there's too many good things to say about this film. And it's whatever I do to explain it to somebody who's not seen it is not going to do it justice. So just know that it's got an amazing soundtrack. David Bowie's in it. So, not David Bowie, but his music is in it.
Check.
So, yeah. Everything Everywhere All at Once, the new movie by the Daniels. The trailer has a David Bowie song in it. So,
check. How to make a great film. Put a David Bowie song.
No.
Well, now it's put a David Bowie song and Joni Mitchell song in the film, and I'm good.
There you go.
Watch what happens.
Let's happen.
Joni Mitchell is coming everywhere. Every chance you get, you're going to see some version of that song. What's the song from Coda? What's the song she sings?
Both Sides Now. Yeah.
Both Sides Now.
That's in, Both Sides Now is in Love Actually too. So yeah. That's actually
Joni Mitchell version?
Yeah, it's definitely a Joni Mitchell version.
I have problems with that film. There's something about it that I think it's disguised itself. Anyway, Licorice Pizza. I think you're right on all levels. It's going to be what happens with the Coen brothers with you. The first time you see it, you're like, And then the second time you see it, it's like, oh, that's brilliant. Now, I did love Licorice Pizza the first time I saw it. The trappings of the film were explained brilliantly by you. The whole power dynamic thing was explained. The whole making a person an obvious idiot was explained. I got it all after you said all that. That clarified that for me. But I think Licorice Pizza is one of those films. It's going to be 2:00 in the morning. I can't sleep. It's going to be on. I'm going to watch it and be like, this is the best movie ever, But it's layered in a way that, well, it's like a Paul Thomas Anderson film. It's layered, but you can smell the stuff. You can smell the 70s. You can smell the Hairspray when all the girls are waiting in line. You can smell the streets. You can smell the gymnasium where they're taking the pictures. You can smell the waterbed store. You can smell the restaurants. There's just something
Everybody's
about it.
Everybody's sweaty all the time.
There's texture to it. So I think eventually I'll come around to it being as great as it is. But for right now, I'm standing just a little on the side of it because I need to rewatch it after we talked about it. Because when you were talking about certain things, the Tom Waits stuff, the Sean Penn stuff, I was like, wait, I'm not sure why that's even there. And then you gave a great explanation of why it matters in the narrative. And I was like, oh yeah, so I can't wait to watch it again with the knowledge of what you saw and the improvements to my basic opinions about it. So I can't wait.
Yeah. All right. You're number one. I think I know what it is.
You always do, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes. The Tragedy of Macbeth. I cannot stop watching this film. And I'm as perplexed about it as most people might be. Not the film, just my initial need to see it again and again and again. I've seen it 4 times all the way through.
Yeah.
All 4 times. It wasn't just I turned it on and then turned it off. I turned it on. I watched the middle of it. I've watched it 4 times from beginning, middle to end. It's the most understandable Shakespeare's been to my ear ever. The performances are obviously Oscar nominatable. Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand will come up in history as should have been nominated. And it's still strange to think of Joel Coen as a director and not the Coen brothers as directors. I will get used to that. But man, some of the shots he does in this film are amazing. The Witch's Brew scene where he's in some kind of sauna pool thing and the witches are above him and, 2 of them are completely shadowed out, barely see the third one. Catherine Hunter, who was nominated for the BAFTA, and in another parallel universe, she was nominated for the Oscar, I'm sure of it, because it's outstanding what she does. She's one of the witches, but she's all of the witches. Yep. Who would have ever thought of that? Joel Coen. And some of the shots and the production value, any other year, it would have swept the Oscars for all of its categories. Just there were other things that were more interesting to people's eyes, cinematography-wise, production value-wise.
Bruno Del Bonell's the cinematographer. Yeah, he crushed it.
He's amazing. It's amazing what he did. And then I started watching, going down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos, the making of it, and how much is really CGI and how much is real and what's not real. And then they started to do things like, well, let's see if we can get that shadow by the lighting. If not, we're going to CGI that shadow. There's a scene where it's like above the entrance of the, I guess, Macbeth's house. And there is 3
archways.
Yeah, that would be a good way to explain it. And apparently the shadow wasn't right, so they CGI'd it. Now, don't get me, I might be wrong about that particular shot, but there are shots in the film where they showed what it looked like in real life versus what it ended up in the film. And it's amazing what they did. And you can't tell the difference. And it's black and white. And who thinks that way? Who thinks to make sure that the shadow, well, obviously the DP and the director,
yeah,
they wanted a certain look and they got it no matter what it took. If they could do it organically, they did. And that's amazing to me. And the grasp of the language, I'm telling you, it's going to be taught in every 10th grade English class from this point on, because it is the most understandable Shakespeare I've ever heard. And I've seen quite a bit at this point in my life. And back to my little nephews again, they were walking through and they were like, is that Denzel Washington? And they just kind of stop and they stare and they were like, black and white, huh? That's the thing, right? And I'm like, yeah, sometimes. And they're just staring, listening, staring, listening. And all of a sudden they start to get back to their video games. My nephew goes, wait a second, is that Shakespeare? And I was like, yeah. He goes, that doesn't sound like Shakespeare. It sounds like normal English. And I was like, there it is.
Yeah.
And that's what a 13-year-old's opinion is. And he's right. It was very interesting to watch the clips of the best actor this year, because when you got to Denzel Washington and he did his thing, it's almost like, ooh,
Yep.
You know, if you hadn't seen any of them, that might be the one you thought would win, because it's such a powerful scene. And I have no idea why, but I cannot stop watching it.
Well, and I think that I'm wondering if are you watching it in a more like not clinical, are you watching it in a more like analytical way where you're like, how did he do that? As opposed to like just being caught up in the story or in, you know, what Macbeth is going through in this particular scene, or how the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is, you know, charged. And
no, I did that on YouTube when I went down that rabbit hole. No, I am following the storyline. I need to talk to somebody about this particular play, because there's some motivations that I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why Duncan's his sons actually are being falsely accused of killing their father. But why do they run? Like, they know they didn't do it. Why are they all of a sudden so scared? So I'm trying to figure out, like, why is he so afraid of Banquo? Is it because the witches predict? And by the way, they're never called witches in the play, which I find interesting. They're called like she-devils or something, or she-hags or something like that. They're never called witches, which I find fascinating, because I try to track that back. Like, was that just an interpretation of the language and somebody said we don't have a word for whatever Shakespeare is using, so we'll put witches? But that would kind of defeat the purpose of Shakespeare, because he does that all the time. So why is he so worried about Banquo and his children? Because Denzel Washington's Macbeth is older than most people who play that role. So if he's worried about the heir apparent to the throne taking over his throne, Banquo only has a young kid. And the witches say his sons. Beware of your sons will be kings also, is what she says to them in that opening sequence. Speak, if you can. So why is he so worried about him to the point where he's got to take him out? So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm watching the movie. I'm trying to figure out what all the motivations are. No, I'm dead in it the whole entire time. And it's 2 hours long? And Shakespeare can seem long on itself. But when I get done with it, I'm like, is it weird that I want to watch this again? Like, immediately?
I guess for me, like, yeah, when I was watching it, I found myself trying to figure out how Denzel Washington's phrasing was able to, because, you know, it's not like it's a David Mamet play or, you know, one of these, you know, Aaron Sorkin screenplays where, you know, it might be annotated to death. You know, you need to pause here, or for lack of a better, Joel and Ethan Coen screenplay, where every little stutter or repeated word is specifically notated. It's a text that's been around forever. And it seemed like he was able to push through certain lines that I would think that somebody would need a breath for, but in the way that he was able to have that kind of breath control to get through an arc of a line that made sense on the phrasing side, but maybe not make sense as far as like, I don't know how somebody could have that much air to be able to push through an emotional line like that and to be able to carry it over into the next line. That kind of like bowled me over. I was kind of amazed that it seemed natural, because Macbeth's got a lot of scenes with a lot of words, and I was kind of amazed that he was able to get through that and make it and connect those scenes, because I just remember, in class reading Shakespeare. We never did Macbeth, but it's so stilted when, you've got a 14-year-old kid reading it or whatever, and you don't really know where one line starts and the next line ends, even with iambic pentameter and all that stuff. You're in good hands with an actor like Denzel Washington, who's spent the time and energy to internalize these lines. Same thing with Frances McDormand. They've spent the time and energy to internalize those lines and then bring them back out in an emotional way where they're not thinking about the words at all. They're just thinking about like you said, their character's motivations.
Well, I watched Patrick Stewart's Tony-nominated performance that they filmed, and then I watched the National Theater's production of Macbeth, and it seems like Denzel, like they trimmed some of the lines for Denzel, but they didn't. They're all there. They just make sense in a different way than Patrick Stewart did it. Patrick Stewart was great, and I don't know the guy who played it in the National Theater. I'm sorry, I don't know his name. You'd recognize him, though. And so it seems wordy in the play, but when they did it for the film, I'm sure it's trimmed, but I also think it's the actors brought what they brought to it. And it was interesting to watch something that made complete sense to me when I was watching this version, the Coen bro, his version versus watching the National Theater's version. It all made sense, but then watching another actor interpret it, I still had to struggle to figure it out again because of their reinterpretation of it. Sometimes better, not better, but sometimes different, and sometimes not as clear as what Denzel does. And it's interesting to me as an actor how two people interpret something and how something can make so much sense to my ears, and then I have to struggle again to reinterpret it by what you're choosing to do. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm fascinated by it, but they need to stop the 14-year-old from speaking Shakespeare in English class at 10:30 in the morning. They need to stop that. They need to just say, hey, I come after lunch. We're going to go to the auditorium and we're going to watch this really cool version of the Tragedy of Macbeth with all your favorite actors in it, Denzel being one of them. You'll be good. We'll never have to get you to say those lines again. Just watch what Denzel does. Just watch what these guys do. And we're going to be good. Yeah. So I did say to you that I thought it was going to become my favorite movie of the year, and it has never not been at number one on this list. So
yeah.
There you go.
The actor in the National Theater Macbeth is Rory Kinnear, who was in all the Daniel Craig James Bond movies as Tanner. He was like M's assistant in the James Bond movies. He's also in the new Alex Garland movie, Men. He's like it's Jesse Buckley and him pretty much. All right. So that's it. We did it.
What a daunting year, though. This has been a hard year for movies. I mean, it's been a good year for movies, but I was going to say I'm a little burnt out at this point, but I'm never really burned out when it comes to movies. But we took a little time to get to this episode, and I had some stuff happen last week that put this on pause, and I'm kind of glad. I think it was more mental than it was physical. I thought it was physical, but I think it was just everything that happened at the Oscars and everything that has happened in this last year, in these last 2 years, going on 3 years almost, made it feel like this year was long, very long. And these movies did not apologize for their subject matter, and they're daunting and they're long in the best sense of the word. I'm not talking about the length of the time like 3 hours, or, Drive My Car, or The Power of the Dog being purposely paced. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the gravity, the weight of them were heavy. And so I think I was a little burnt out.
Yeah, your list is our lists are actually switched, like they're swapped from what I would think they would be or what they have been in the past. Whereas like in 2015, my favorite movie was Green Room. Like I was like going hard for Green Room, and it's like this is not a fun movie, but it's a great movie. But and I'm just looking at your list, and it's like West Side Story is the only movie that's like, and it's actually a tragedy. So yeah. I mean, that's the like brightest movie of all of the movies in your list. Whereas I've got Coda, Spider-Man. We both have Dune, but it's just kind of like a James Bond movie. So Licorice Pizza. I mean, yeah.
Thank goodness for those films, though, because films like Coda, maybe that's why Coda resonated so much with people, because Coda is a light. It's a light. It's just bright, and it shines really bright. And it is a feel-good movie in the best sense of the word. So maybe it's about me more than the movies this year. Maybe it's about where my life is more than anything else. But it was a strong year for movies. I hear every year how bad movies were and there weren't any great movies. And then you see this list and you go, come on now. Did you see 2021's releases? Come on. You saw these movies. Come on. This is a great year for movies. And it was a great year for movies. It's just, I'm glad we get to start again. I'm glad we're, well, Oscar-wise at least, which I don't know how they're going to do that, how they're going to fix all the timing of all that stuff. You know what I think they should do? Here's what I think they should do. And I don't know if I said this before, and I'll end with this. I do not like the whole award season thing. Like it's become a season now.
Yeah.
Like Christmas or Thanksgiving and the holiday season. It's become a thing now. So it starts with Sundance and goes to Tribeca and then blah, 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 and then all the way to the BAFTAs to the Oscars. What I think they need to do is let all those happen. And then 6 months later, do the Oscars, completely void of anything that happened 6 months before that. I mean, I'm not saying that movies won't line up again, but by the time we're getting to the Oscars now, not that one award is more important than the other. I certainly don't believe that. I believe the DGA is just as important as the SAG award. I believe the SAG is just as important as the Producers Guild award, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to put a level of the importance on these accolades. But by time you get to the Oscars and the BAFTAs, it's so not predictable, but so not surprising that I'm wondering what time would do if we put some time in between the chunk of the critic awards and everything else, and then the Oscars, or, the BAFTAs, and then 4 weeks later, the Oscars.
Yeah.
Voting, but they don't do that.
They can't do that because it's part of the industry now. Like the reason why you get a movie greenlit is because you're an Academy Award winner or because you're an Academy Award nominee. Like that's your cachet, that's
Hamaguchi.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is that, like, if you win the Super Bowl, because if you're the starting quarterback of a team that wins a Super Bowl, like, you can expect to get more money the next time your contract comes up because you led your team to the Super Bowl or whatever it is. If you're a dominant, forward for your NBA team, then you can expect more money. Like there are goalposts that you can reach and say, like, I reached these, these particular things. That's it for these. I mean, and we're talking about the same amounts of money here, athletes versus, movie stars. I mean, it's the same thing. Movie star does a single movie, they get $25 million. A quarterback gets $25 million a year. It's the same thing.
I don't look at it that way, though. I look at it that now Hamaguchi gets to walk into a room and say, boom, here's my gold statue. Sean Hayter can say, oh, remember that movie 9 years ago I wanted to make and you didn't want me to make it because I only made one film and nobody saw it? I saw it. Tallulah with Elliot Page and a couple other people, Allison Janney. Oh, wow. It's a good film. You should watch it. It's a very interesting film. And the one actress, I can't think of her name right now, she's very good too. She was in Rabbit Hole with Nicole Kidman. Anyway, the point is that Sean Hayter's going to walk into a room and be like, yeah, can I have the money for that now? And they're going to go, oh yeah, 3-time Academy Award winner. Not her, but her film won all 3 of its Oscars. So that's the reverse of that. they're looking for relevance to the Oscars. They're looking for an audience from the Oscars. And what they need to realize is that, well, what I see as the issue is, I was like I'm going to be able to tell anybody and anybody's going to listen to me. But if they were to listen to me, they have to be true to its nature. And the nature of the Oscars is excitement for people who gather around a movie and watch it compete against another movie. It's become this one after the next award show. So it's like watching 7 Super Bowls every weekend. Mm-hmm. It's like by the time you get to the real Super Bowl, if that's what you want to call it, or you get to the one that happens in America on Super Bowl Sunday, you're kind of now numb to all of the games because now there's been 7 of them. Mm-hmm. Or 26 of them, or how many there are, and I'm interested in all of those things. But I hope that somebody comes in one day and goes, okay, we need to strip this all back. We need to make this a ceremony that's entertaining, not an entertaining show. We need to make it a ceremony that's entertaining. And we need to not worry about the time, because the time will take care of itself if we stick true to its nature, because that's how it was 20 years ago. It stuck true to its nature. It was a ceremony that was entertaining. And we just need to swing back to it. That said, it's been a great year in movies, and I'm glad that I've seen the films that I've seen.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.